Joining us, Maryland Congressman and ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee, Jamie Raskin. Congressman, really good to have you. I'm going to get to that in one moment. I want to start, though, with contempt. Hillary and Bill Clinton, it got out of committee. It's going to go to a floor vote. How are you going to vote? Do you believe they should be held in contempt for refusing to testify about Jeffrey Epstein?
I'm planning to vote no for two reasons, and I spent a lot of time on these contempt issues when so many Republicans refused to come before the January 6th Select Committee. And the only two who ended up being referred for contempt and then prosecuted and convicted for contempt were two people, Steve Bannon and Peter Navarro, who did absolutely nothing to cooperate with the committee. But the case law has been that if people are willing to participate and to engage with the committee, then you go back and forth. It's always an unsatisfying process from the congressional perspective, but if people are basically engaged in good faith, that's not contempt such that you would put someone in jail for it. But even if we were going to lower the standards and say we should start jailing people for contempt, even if they've, submitted statements as the Clintons have done, and even if they're willing to sit down for an interview with note takers, as the Clintons said they would be, I wouldn't start with them. I would start with Pam Bondi, who has failed to release more than 99% of all of the Epstein files that she was subpoenaed to bring before the committee. And that's not only a subpoena now, that's federal law. And so that's where the real action is with Pam Bondi and the Attorney General. You could also look at the co-conspirator of Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell, who is a convicted criminal who also has not yet come before the committee and has not answered questions. And undoubtedly, she's got a lot to say, too. So I don't like the Republicans making a partisan thing out of this, deciding just to go after the Clintons. If we're going to decide to start holding lots of people in contempt, let's do it across the board.
Yeah, I hear you. I think that's fair. I wonder if there's not a need to just draw a line in the sand and overcome partisan politics here? Because you have Stephen Lynch, Maxwell Frost, Ayanna Pressley, Emily Randall, Latifah Simon, Rashida Tlaib, Rajna Krishnamurthy Summerly, and Melanie Stansbury, all Democratic congresspeople, voting yes to advance this vote of contempt out of the committee. I don't know their reasoning, but I'm going to guess it's because they want to draw a line in the sand and say this matters regardless of which party you are on. You got to come in front of Congress if we call you. Do you understand that reasoning, and would that sway you, make you feel any differently about this?
Well, to be clear, Summer Lee, who I think is in that group you just read, she tried to get a subpoena against Pam Bondi, and they made the precise point I just made, which is that Pam Bondi and the Department of Justice have 99% of the material that the world hasn't seen yet. They are the key to the entire case. Bill Clinton, whatever he knows, that's probably more around 1% or less of the entire case. Of course, we wouldn't know until we get everything from DOJ. So they made the point that I made, which is we should try to make this bipartisan and to have it apply across the board. The Republicans rejected it, and I think they felt, well, they'll at least go ahead and vote to press the contempt against the Clintons. And I just would not have done that, given that Donald Trump said he did everything he could to blockade the release of information. Then when he read the writing on the wall, when a handful of Republicans joined us in the discharge petition, then he said, OK, we'll get behind it, but I'm going to make this all about the Democrats and all about the Clintons. And I just wouldn't play into that strategy. But I understand what my friends did there. And it was kind of a no-win situation, for the Democrats at that point. But I'm not going to support that double standard.
OK, let's talk about Jack Smith. He's going to be testifying tomorrow. It could be as long as 6 hours in the hot seat. But he's going to have his hands tied. He's not going to be able to talk about the classified documents case. He might be able to talk about it a month from now when the order that Judge Eileen Cannon put on his final report gets lifted. Obviously, the Trump administration is trying to put that order back on and put it on indefinitely. If she does not do that, do you believe that Jack Smith would come back in another month to talk about the classified documents case?
Well, I sure hope he would, and I imagine that he would. This Eileen Cannon order is absolutely extraordinary. I mean, there's basically been nothing like it. The whole thing was designed to protect Donald Trump from these extraordinary revelations of how he pilfered classified government documents, kept them in his bathroom, kept them in his ballroom, totally open to the public with all kinds of foreigners, trafficking in and out of Mar-a-Lago. And her initial rationale for it was she wanted to protect Donald Trump's potential co-conspirators, the people who helped him cover this up. But then the Trump Department of Justice dismissed all of those charges and shut those cases down. At that point, the second report of the special counsel should have been made public to the whole world. But for inscrutable reasons, she's decided to try to sweep it all under the rug. And they are going to continue to try to do that, as we've seen from Donald Trump. If he didn't do anything wrong, what are they trying to hide at this point?
Well, let me ask you about why this is happening tomorrow, because Jack Smith had said for months that he wants to testify publicly. House Republicans said, no, we're going to do it privately. They did it. It was recorded. By most accounts, it did not go well for Republicans. Jack Smith was very meticulous in pushing back and laying out why he believed Donald Trump was guilty and that he could secure a conviction and that he would do it for Democrats or Republicans. You said so in a statement last Friday. So if it didn't go well for Republicans and Republicans had already refused to let him testify publicly, why do they want him to testify publicly now?
You'd have to ask them. I don't know exactly why, other than maybe they're just deciding to do the right thing, an admittedly dubious proposition, because every other special counsel has been permitted to bring his or her findings before the world and testify publicly before the House Judiciary Committee. And so this is exactly following the order that has always taken place before. But what was so devastating about his presentation was that, number one, he schooled them into what the responsibilities of a federal prosecutor actually are, and two, he demonstrated that they had proof beyond a reasonable doubt for every element of every federal offense that they charged Donald Trump with respect to trying to overturn the 2020 presidential election and get him installed as the president against an election he lost by more than 7 million votes to Joe Biden.
Should he be concerned about walking into a potential trap? The administration has used lying to Congress or misrepresenting to Congress as a reason to prosecute others.
Well, in Jack Smith, you're talking about one of the greatest living prosecutors right now. I'm sure he's thought about that, but it reminds me your question of what Mark Twain said, which is if you always tell the truth, you never have anything to remember. And so this is a guy who tells the truth. He executes his professional and ethical duties zealously, and he's got nothing to be afraid of. In the meantime, what you're going to see is a scrambled effort by a bunch of Republicans to throw rotten tomatoes at him. In the meantime, he's going to try to tell America what he found in his investigation and how Donald Trump, in fact, tried to interfere with a federal proceeding in order to defraud the United States of a real election and to cheat millions and millions of people out of their voting rights and the entire country out of a fair election. That's the story he's going to tell tomorrow. And our strategy is just to ask him a handful of questions and let him speak.
I'm not sure if you saw it this morning, but at Davos, Donald Trump said that the people who rigged the 2020 election are about to be prosecuted. It's going to happen soon. He called it breaking news. What do you take that to mean?
Well, we know that that is the founding and obsessive big lie of his administration. You basically can't get hired unless you bow down to that lie. And of course, from that lie flow all other kinds of lies, including the preposterous idea that the violent insurrection of January 6th was organized by Antifa and FBI agents and so on. And those are the kinds of lies we've been hearing from across the aisle recently. So I don't know exactly which threat that is, but obviously Trump has converted his entire administration into a political vendetta campaign against people who simply brought him the bad news that he lost the 2020 election. That includes his own Attorney General, William Barr, who said that everything Donald Trump was saying was BS. It includes 60 federal and state courts in the land, including 8 judges he appointed to the bench himself, who rejected and repudiated every one of his claims of electoral corruption and electoral fraud. So Jack Smith has the opportunity tomorrow to speak to the country about what actually happened, even though the Roberts Court, in its non-infinite wisdom, decided to shut the case down. And so they will talk about the failed Jack Smith investigations. There was nothing failed about them. They were a great success. They were blockaded by the Supreme Court. And then Smith could not proceed because Trump, with all those protections, got elected president again. And that's where we are, still living with the legacy of this big lie.